And yeah, we're gonna start with Rick. For anyone though, too, is the washroom is just that gray door right over there. If you haven't used it. All right, Rick.
Hi, most of you guys know me. My name's Rick. What most of you don't know is I'm no longer with my previous companies. I'm now with Glass Fab. We make sealed units, tempered lights, that type of thing. It's kind of hard to follow. So yeah, as you can see, we got the regular, one of the leaders in quality custom glass fabrication through innovation, production methods, continued investments in automation, and a commitment to training and developing the best team. Thanks to our unique capabilities, we're able to meet our customer glass requirements speedier. Competition. I got it in. That's all right. So basically all that says is we're located in Aldergrove. So you can just go down there. Our products and services, we do insulated glass units, dual pane, triple pane, skinny triples, kind of the whole thing. Tempered lights, we also do the notching, the holes, the rake shapes, all of that kind of stuff as well as single glaze, shower doors, railings, etc. We are members, obviously, of Fenestration Canada, new members this year. Safety Glazing Certification Council, all of our tempered lights are certified, as our sealed units are through IGMA. And that's about it. We are starting to sell in the Alberta region right now, which is kind of my primary responsibility. So at this point, we're actually running at least one truck a week into Alberta. So we want to continue growing that and kind of expand in this direction. So we're proud to sponsor this event, and thank you very much.
All right. Go. Can you hear me? Do I need a mic? So, can they hear me? You need to. All right. So thanks for coming. Thanks to Nicole and her team for allowing us to invade her space for the day. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks to Rick at Glass Fab, of course, and Novatech, sponsors for today. So my name's Terry Adamson. For anybody in the room that doesn't know me, I'm Fenestration Canada's technical director. I've been with FenCan we're almost close to 2 years. And prior to that, I was in window door manufacturing for about 37 years or so. So I've been around the block, but really enjoying this next phase of what I do. I actually love it. It allows me to work with manufacturers and members across the country to just try and help guys better understand how to get through challenges. So what I wanted to do today was just really briefly, just a couple of things that I'm working on. So the fall protection in the National Building Code 2020, so the latest update that came out in March of last year, that is currently being worked on by provinces for adoption by March 24th of 2024. There's something in there that talks about fall protection for operable windows. And again, I just want to touch on it. The sill height or the operable height raises to 900 millimeters, which is pretty significant. I was previously 450, about 17 inches or so, 18 inches. So that's a pretty significant change. But there's something that was also in the language in that change that's really concerning, that was presented in PEI by Al Ugalis, our technical advisor. I'm not going to get too deep into it because we don't have a lot of time, But in that change, they have some wording in there that references WOCDs. So F2090 compliant WOCDs, window opening control devices. And if you read that language, first off, there's errors in the language. It states things that are actually not true. It talks about them being fixed lever control devices, things like that. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it, like I say. So, whoops. I'm sorry. I just this shirt. It's not great for that. Who bought these shirts, man? All right. Yeah. So again, I'm not going to get into the whole guard height thing. We're not the right place. I don't have time for it. But this WOCD change in the NBC 2020 is really difficult, really challenging, and could cause a lot of members compliance issues if they were to use WOCDs. So what we're doing at Fenestration Canada is we're working with a small task group. I think there's about 6 of us. Dave Goldsmith is somewhere here, right there. How could I miss Dave? He's working with us on it. There's a couple of guys from FGIA as well. Robert Jutras from AVFQ. And we've drafted a letter. Dave's done a great job he drafted the majority of it, and him and I worked through some of it that we now have with the task group that outlines the problems with WOCD language in the new code. And what we're trying to do is reach out to the provinces that are making the current amendments to their codes based on the NBC to help them see this challenge and to try and not convince them, to make them understand that a F2090 WOCD is actually a good device, and it could be really useful and really helpful to the industry when it comes to fall protection as well as egress windows. So that's in the works. I just wanted to share that's going on. If anybody's interested, the letter is going out probably the end of next week, I think, to the provinces, or at least to BC, and as well to Paul in Alberta. They're very interested in looking at what we've got. So you'll be able to follow what's going on. And if you're really interested, shoot me a note, Terry at fenestrationcanada.ca, and we can have you sit in on some of that. So again, I'm not going to waste any time going into guard heights. It's pretty clear. 900 millimeter operable height with a 600 millimeter floor to grade drop outside means that you have to have a guard on that window. So that's the change. So it's something you're going to want to pay attention to as it comes down the provincial, as the provincial changes come down. Something else might not be of interest to people in Alberta or other parts of the country, but there is something happening in British Columbia right now that the BC Building Code, as well as the Vancouver Building Bylaw, references clause 3.2 in the Vancouver Building Bylaw modeling guidelines. And it's really concerning in that if you read that language, it says that you need to thermally model every product in a building. So if you don't have a NAF's performance value for that product, so standard products for NFRC, you would need to model it. So Dave, maybe you can just touch on some of the stuff that you've run into currently with, we won't name any names.
Yeah. So people are taking this language seriously enough that you point out to them that the mullions of steel reinforcing that's not accounted for and they're not in FRC sizes, then they want the actual product mold, and it might be a 6-light, 9-light unit. Costs $600 to get a proper model done of that. And then it says that it performs it like a U.21, where the original project specification was U.18. So you spend the $600 just to disqualify yourself from quoting the project, and then somebody else who, all they want to see is a piece of paper that says, yeah, the window has the U value you want, and some guys are they're averaging the U value of all the standard NFRC type products on the building, providing a piece of paper that shows them what they want to see.
Yeah.
And you can't compete against it.
Yeah. So this language is really interesting in that it catches an issue that's been raised a number of times in the past, is that NFRC modeled sizes, products that aren't those exact sizes and designs, the numbers won't be accurate between those two. And that now is based on this language in Vancouver Building Bylaws modeling guidelines, designers and architects are starting to see that that's actually the case. And in order to get the proper design, they're asking for modeling of every product. So we're working on it. We're looking at it. We're talking. We had a meeting the other day with Building Standards Branch in BC, raised the issue with them. They're now working on it with the City of Vancouver to try and bring some clarity to this language so that, you know, you don't end up having to model every product, or you know what, maybe at some point we will, but heaven help us if we do. So anyway, just letting you know, in case maybe you do business in Vancouver and British Columbia. I always pump this. Unfortunately, it's really challenging to get people to use it. This is on our website. It's just an online Q&A forum. Would really like you guys to get onto it. There are a number of posts in there already that might be of interest. If you have a question about anything related to our industry, you can log into there, go in, post your question. I get notified as soon as a question is posted, and I'll get you an answer. You can you know, comment to them. You can like answers. You can, you know, raise the profile of a question. It's a really great tool for guys that just want to, you know, catch up on what's going on in the industry and to hear questions that other guys are facing as well. So I really, really would love to see guys use it more. So it's a great little tool. Whoops. And then Tech Talk sessions. I'm working on this year's Tech Talk sessions, our online webinars. I've got one coming up on acoustic testing, hopefully early March, maybe even the end of this month, but I'm working on it for March. We have commercial, we've hired some commercial consultants that are also working with Fenestration Canada now to develop our commercial chapters. So you're going to be seeing more content on the commercial side of our industry within Fenestration Canada. So that's something to watch for. And of course, May 24 to 26, join us in Kelowna for our spring AGM. And right now there's a BOGO deal on. Talk to Lane. It's a great deal. If new member pay one, current member pay one, get one free. So that's a great deal. So should try and be there for that. Okay, so we're going to bring up Mr. McLauchlan here, and he's going to tell us about Silpan detailing and his products and et cetera, et cetera. So let me get your slides up and that. Hear you.
You have the pleasure of listening to the boring topic of window installations. And the glare off the screen isn't going to help me, but I'll muddle through it. Anybody watch that great Super Bowl yesterday?
Was that?
Was that? Still in the hotel room, right? Oh. That was pretty good. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh.
Down arrow will move you through.
Down arrow moving me through. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. What did I do already? Good to go. All right. Arrow down. Good to go. Yeah, so again, everybody, thank you very much for showing up. Thanks for RSVP Design for hosting this event and the great lunch and all the sponsors. And particularly thank you for the opportunity to talk about, as I said, this boring topic of window installations. It may not be a particular topic that you're used to hearing about. I'm not particularly used to discussing in an audience like this. My audiences typically are builders or homeowners that are very upset, but we'll hopefully mesmerize you with a bit of the history that I bring to the table from the last 22 some years. A little bit about the company I represent, or companies. One of them is Homeflash. We are a manufacturer, we design, and we also provide the revolutionary service of installing our system into or for the builders or the developer or the architect, so that we're really bridging one of those issues of not just selling the product and it goes into the hands of the hands of the hands and ends up getting installed. We cross all gamuts. We manufacture, design, engineer, test, and install. Part of our struggles, as you can see there at the end, is with CCMC. I'll touch upon that a little bit. I don't want to beat them up too bad, but suffice to say, as part of being an entrepreneur and coming up with these types of products for the window installation industry, has been dealing with federal legislation and governments. Our goal is maximizing the window wall performance, and that has never been more true now with the growth of net zero and the various wall designs that we're seeing and trying to implement whether it's flanged or non-flanged windows into those wall assemblies has been fun, to say the least. We're always trying to stay ahead of the curve, but again, as I said, the wall designs are changing rapidly. We're seeing more of our clients subscribing to prefab wall assemblies and wanting to have everything come out of a plant ready to go. So we're also having to deal with that as a company, as a product and the design. Our primary market is flanged, non-flanged residential installations. That would also include some mixed use product. We've, again, since 1999, I started a product some of you may be familiar with called Envelope Seal. It's a liquid applied waterproofing, which at the time in 1999, as we were introducing flange mounted windows, I was getting an extreme amount of pushback. Liquid applied waterproofing used to bridge a nailing flange onto a wall. It was crazy language. And a little bit of background on the company that again, my 20 years experience was, I got a letter of a cease and desist from my good friends at Province. I was like, what? Sharing, yeah. You know, I think it was Chris Ty at the time. But anyway, I jump in the car to show my dedication to this industry and what I've done and continue to do. Drove through a snowstorm from Calgary to Edmonton. I hit the ditch outside of Leduc because there was a multi-vehicle accident, hit the ditch, cut my forehead wide open, drove to City Hall, struggled my way up the elevator, bleeding to death, did my pitch to Chris Ty, and he goes, "You're good to go. Go look after yourself and get a Band-Aid on." That was dedication. Yes. The ketchup bottle wasn't working so well. But as I walk in the room and there must have been busted. So anyway, that again speaks to my 20 years dedication into the industry. And since then, a combination of the Envelope Seal, liquid applied waterproofing with my good friends at Tremco. We've had an extremely successful track record. And I always encourage our clients over these years, if you have a window wall failure, and I'm involved, let me know. I want to find out and help you. 99.9% of window failures, building envelope failures, don't involve the window or the window wall interface. When our products are involved, the water is getting into the wall assembly in other areas. And we found that time and time again. Anyway, without further ado, we're across Canada now. We launched in Toronto 2 years ago, just before COVID. And we're doing 3 times the work, or 2/3 the work that we're doing across Alberta, just in Toronto and the GTA, since it's been about 10 months now. Again, just touching upon some of our partners that we work with that has helped us get to the position we are at, specifically the window wall interface and designing the systems and products for that. Builders, needless to say, architects, engineers play a key role in helping us guide our direction and staying ahead of the curve of technology. New warranty providers, another resource that we've leaned on to help guide us with the builder and absolving any risk and liability. The unions and framing, that's something a little foreign to us here in Alberta, but I'll tell you in Toronto, again, the time I've been there and the growth, my door is being knocked on by local unions wanting and demanding that we become a part of the union. So for what it's worth, that's a list of the relationships that we have to cultivate just to deal with the installation at times of windows and doors. Again, some of the testing partners, CSA, products have to be, compliant in certain areas. Building science, litigators. How deep of a dive do I do? We go to law firms who deal specifically with condo boards and finding out some of the details that help us stave off any problems, staying ahead of the curve. Again, stories of dedication. So these are some of the partners that I deal with as a part of our growth. Again, tough time being an entrepreneur. I told you the story earlier about driving. Dealing with the CCMC is another challenge. Just real briefly on dealing with CCMC and ensuring that our products meet certain regulations are talking with CCMC to try to get a testing standard. And for those in the audience that are familiar with CCMC or not, they have to have a standard, which is a long list of tests that are relevant to the product and its performance. I just had a conversation with my contact at CCMC. He says, Richard, good luck. You're looking at 3.5 years to get a phone book or a standard list of tests to test for a sill pan flashing. I said, there's no way. And a minimum of $250,000. Code cycles are going to change by then. I could be wasting my time, wasting my money. So just a snapshot of the length that I have to go, and many entrepreneurs or many product developers, and you as window manufacturers are well aware of these challenges, I'm sure. Bad language in this litigation. One of the biggest challenges I have as builders, and I deal with builders and developers, is the word litigation. At all costs, we want to absolve ourselves of litigation. Engineers and architects, we want to see our premiums reduced. We don't want to be a part of failures, window wall interface in the building envelope. Court costs. These are some of the bad words that I spoke of in general, because these are the hot buttons that I deal with every day in dealing with builders, architects, engineers, even to some degree, window manufacturers, particularly in Toronto. The last one here we see was something given to me by a new home warranty provider, fairly large one. And he's always a part of litigation. And he always says, here's the builders or the representatives say, well, we didn't know. We've always built like that. Our competitors have always built like this. And he says, that's always quoted to him by the judge. Well, that's a poor position of defense. You didn't know. And we're there to remove those lines. I always try to find an analogy to help get across the importance of installing your products. And it's always mystifies me. And I'll get into a point here that I've received comments from big tract builders, and we'll get into it on a couple of slides ahead. But I try to draw an analogy. Perhaps this is a little too dramatic for some of you, but hopefully it hits the point of compliance with the code. And as the first paragraph demonstrates, basically, is it okay to drink and drive if you know the police are telling you you're not going to get caught? Is that okay? I convey to the builders and all parties involved in what I do for them, is it okay not to put your windows in accordance with code because you know the SCOs are not looking? And I can tell you right now, for a fact, I've been told many times that it is not on the radar of SCOs to look for window installation guidelines. Not because they don't have the budget and because they don't have the time to dedicate to look at all the rough openings. That's a fact. But my point hopefully is driven clear. If the police are not looking, is it okay to break the law? And some of you may go, wow, you're pretty damn dramatic with that. But sill pans, are they needed? I thank a friend of mine, Rick Zolmer, for putting together that little demonstration on the side there. But hopefully that says it all. Why the reluctance? Why is there reluctance out there for the building community or those that are in charge of overseeing the installation of windows, speccing the installation? Why is there such a reluctance to build it to the code? And I'm here for answers. I would like to learn from you, as well as convey what I've brought to the table after 20 years of dealing exclusively with window and door installations. Why is there such a reluctance to do it properly? I'll tell you why. And I'm going to try to get through this and when my time runs out. I've had numerous meetings with large tract builders on the point of, because repairing is cheaper. They build at the 450 homes a year throughout Alberta. They had maybe 25 leaks that came to the forefront. It was easier to fix the leak than it was to bring on another trade, incorporate those costs of another trade into the construction process. It was easier to shell out 75 grand than it was to bring on another trade for 350,000. Warranty providers, no disrespect, but give the builder first right of refusal to fix the deficiency and move forward. But the fact is, it's cheaper to fix the deficiencies, deal with the consumer and move on than it is to add another 350, 400,000. I think we can pull some numbers out. My position is you've just lost those 25 recurring sales, and they're going to spread that bad karma, shall we say, throughout the industry. Enforcement. Another one of the stumbling blocks I face every single day, as I brought out a little earlier, no disrespect to any one governmental level in particular, but the lack of enforcement. In a couple of slides down the road, you'll see what I'm talking about. There seems to be a lack of enforcement. Perhaps it's to do strictly with budgets, not enough manpower. We're all experiencing these issues of non-manpower and budgets. Is there rewards required and simply the cost? Again, I want to talk really quickly about an aha moment. 20-some years ago, I was in warranty for a major tract builder. The room was sold out. There were people in the hallways. This was an epidemic at the time. And we started the discussion, what's the difference between flange and brick mold? Well, it seems pretty clear. One's wood and one's PVC or fiberglass. But the fact was we were treating the rough openings the same as a brick mold as we were with the flange. The issue was the brick mold provided a compression seal, at the time, tar paper, building wrap of some fashion. So you've got a rigid product creating a gasket. And for those that are familiar with a car engine, for example, you need to have the head of the engine securely fastened to the block so that you don't lose fluids or you don't have fluids coming in. Flange mounted windows came along, broken, cracked, pre-punched nail holes, or tenting occurred, but we never changed the installation practice to reflect the different product and the method of installation. So therefore we came along and said, hey, we need something to fix the flange, to bridge the flange onto the wall and stop the moisture from getting in or the airflow from getting out. And again, as I said earlier, envelope seal came along and we've done hundreds of thousands of windows and doors with tremendous success, according to our clients. Contentious issue, for sure. Some say it's due to tighter homes. I don't know if you would agree to that, but the interest level now of door blower testing and creating a tighter home, any failures or penetrations in the building envelope, particularly window wall interfaces, rough openings, it's a problem. Legislation, new home warranty provisions. I think a lot of us are familiar, new home warranty now, 5-year minimum building envelope legislation. We have the CSA A40. I think there's a number of us in this room that are working with CSA to some degree on the new installation of windows and doors and skylights. And that's in the works. One of the issues is lack of knowledge. A lot of the builders are entrust the framer to be educated on this. Another one of the clients that we have and hold dear to our hearts that have been invaluable, believe it or not, are the framers. Framers are bringing more business my way. Why? Because they don't want to touch your windows. They hate touching windows. They absolutely despise it to the point where, Richard, why don't you do it? Here's a question for everybody in the crowd. Answer correctly, you could win a hat or leftover lasagna or chicken cacciatore. Maybe this is a better one for Dave. Does Alberta require a sill pan flashing?
Depends on the exposure condition.
When you look at table A1, all of Alberta has no rain ever. Therefore, we don't need a sill pan. I'm trying to get that removed. Alberta maybe doesn't get the rain of the coast, but I'll tell you, we get a wind-driven rain here. And most of the occurrences throughout my tenure was when it was a rain and it came straight down. I wasn't too worried as a warranty manager for the builder when it came sideways with a 60-mile-an-hour wind out of the southwest. I knew Monday morning my phones were going to be jammed with messages from homeowners. My point to this is that Alberta doesn't need a sill pan flashing under its current reading, as I understand it, because we don't have any rainfall. There's no exposure here. I'm hoping to get that particular segment reviewed, removed, so that a sill pan is a sill pan, as a window is a window. What's the old saying? There's two kinds of windows, the ones that leak and the ones that will leak. Am I right on that? No disrespect. This is to my point earlier. Run across this all the time. It's easier for me to repair the costs and pay for a warranty department, because that's why I have a warranty department, than it is to bring in another trade. And those numbers are, low. In particular, 20 repairs may be high for some builders. It depends on the builder, but the cost is what they look at in terms of bringing on another trade. And that's the way they look at it. Getting into an interesting discussion here, or topic that you may find interesting. I was quite shocked about, and still do to this day. Standing water on the majority, not all, but on the majority of membranes. I looked at all the warranties, because quite frankly, it's our competitor, and I didn't see any reference in most of the warranties for most of the suppliers about standing water. They prescribe a membrane on the sill, which in some cases has a negative slope and is capable of holding water that comes down into the rough opening. But when I asked them and phoned them and reached out to their technical departments across North America, I says, is it okay for you to use your product with standing water? Every one of them said no, absolutely not. The water is meant to drain off. If you want to use a membrane on a flat horizontal surface, it's got to be a torch on. I was kind of shocked by that. Looked at their warranties. Yeah, there was no language that allowed for the use of a membrane on a horizontal surface. Oh, and that previous, do I push the arrow back to get back? Yeah. There. I mean, these are some beauties. You see the shims, all kinds. I mean, perhaps we've seen these, perhaps we haven't. But in my world, every single day, I'm excited to see something new and entertaining. And I'll tell you, I've never been. So this is how your windows go in. You make a great window, triple glazed, argon, low E. And I understand the risks, and Dave brought this to my attention, that as a whole, window manufacturers are terrified of getting too deeply involved in the installation of your product for the liability reasons. I think if you consult with your legal department, they're going to say, yeah, stay away from that, man. That's like COVID. Some of the other beauties I find, this particular one here, that builder, the far left, does in excess of 3,500 homes a year across Canada. And that was their standard spec across the board. You want to know what that was? That was felt. That was felt. Yeah. And reached out to them. Our permits are getting passed. We're getting an occupancy permit. How many here get called as part of building envelope failures or window wall interface failures? There was always a group of people involved in these failures, which, framer, builder, warranty provider, window manufacturer, stucco, brick. There was a whole host of people involved. But these are just some examples, and this goes on today. Some of these pictures are fresh. Calling things a back dam, and again, I don't want to get too picky, but I don't call that a back dam. They put them all in mid dam. Why? Because they don't have to shim. The load of the glass is carried across that particular piece. I could go on and on. Again, this happens. Again, going back to my earlier point, our membranes created equal. Standing water, torch on membranes are the only ones that, according to their warranties, that are applicable. And not all of them. But I was shocked to see some of the mainstream membranes used didn't have provisions in for standing water. I'll get in just a little bit to the CSA 440, which is my Bible. Basically, a sill pan must be designed to catch, drain, and dry. The shims cannot rot. You can't nail through the membrane. It must be sloped. It makes sense. I've had guys that, well, I got a membrane in there. And I'm going, well, you got a roof leak. Would you go and take a pail, put the pail under the roof leak, put a bunch of nail holes in the bottom of the pail, and then fill it full of foam? Of course you wouldn't. You'd want to put the pail under the leak, be able to remove the pail and drain it. What I'm getting at is the CSA 440 is not that difficult. Just catch, drain, and dry. And nailing through membranes that you take the time and the expense to put in, we always shake our heads when we see them drive a bunch of nails through it. And yes, some of the membranes are self-sealing, self-healing. But again, we go back to the point of durability of those membranes after an amount of time. Using OSB shims, bad idea. Water in contact with OSB, how many of you have seen that? Within 6 months, it's like cornflakes. Again, some more beauties. If you're getting sick and tired of seeing bad detailing and designing, welcome to the club. One of the things that, you know, as I've always been told, our occupancy permits get passed, our frame checks or pre-board checks get passed because they see this. The SCO drives by and he sees this type of a detail, give or take. We've got a multitude of products there. I think we've got about 5 products there, 4 or 5. But from the exterior, it appears that they've got a sound sill pan system in place. But in actual fact, as I pointed out earlier, behind the scenes, that's a waste of money. And that's not going to alleviate the age-old problem of sill rot, mold, and premature structural deterioration. So when you're looking from the outside, looks great, looks pretty, an attempt was made, but the fact of the matter is closer inspection needs to be given. And I've tried to help in doing that by suggestions of leaving a window out, leaving one of your windows out, showing the detail to the SCO and saying, that's how it's done. Having these types of details laid out in a drawing as part of the permit application. You know, we're trying to get creative to establish a better way of doing things, to protect the wall, to ensure the window performs as it should. I know building here in Canada, Alberta, is a struggle, and I laugh. I just came from the Vegas show, and I talked to a whole host of builder or window manufacturers at the Las Vegas show, and they were saying, "Oh, I don't know how you guys do it up there. You build homes at what, -5? That's crazy. -5. We're having to put detailing on at -25, 35. So these are some of the challenges that we're facing. Helping provide your product with a better installation, which helps you at the end of the day as a window manufacturer, helping the performance of the window, ensuring that the wall, again, net zero, performs exceptionally well. Talk a little bit about some of the questions now ahead of the curve for me involving net zero construction and installing windows with these new wall designs. I talked a little bit earlier with a couple of gentlemen here, and walls being designed with styrene as the bulk of the wall assembly with no buck, and they're putting the shims on the styrene and then setting the window on that. In this particular case, it was a high rise. It was very impressive. I had said you have to put a piece of metal across here and bridge that, put a saddle basically over that styrene to support the load of the window, and of which they did, because I says, you're going to have window problems and you're going to call the manufacturer, and the manufacturer is going to laugh at you. The picture on the left, I don't know if you can see it very well, I apologize, but in Winnipeg, which is a great area, this winter we introduced our product to a large tract builder, and the installer said, well, my 80 years experience, you have to spray foam the rough opening at the sill. And I said, no, you don't. Your heat loss there is minimal. But what you stand to gain from a sill pan is far more valuable, in my opinion. So stay away from spray foaming. Our product, which I have a sample of, and I'll show it here before the end. Suffice to say, I wanted to demonstrate how much heat loss transfer or cold transfer through your frames do we really see in extreme conditions. So without subscribing to a laboratory in Toronto and spending $100,000, we just took it to a cold box, if you will, froze the piece of jam extension and window, if you will, frame into the ice block, put a heater on the one side, and just see if we had a heat transfer through the PVC frame and jam extension to melt the ice block. I've got a video, and we did it in fast forward, where we did over 45 minutes of that heat gun directly up against the PVC sample onto the ice block, frozen on the other side. It hardly melted it at all. And I got that on video documented. We took a thermal gun without the ice block, and we put the heat gun just to see the temperature variation. The one side was about 85, the other side 14. So there was very little transference of heat or cold through the, and help me out here, Dave, through the channels of the window sample. Dead airspace seems to be a great provider in terms of eliminating the transference of heat or cold. My point to that, in which I demonstrated to this particular builder, was don't worry about insulating that sill. You're better served by stopping the airflow, of which Homeflash does, stops the airflow. Any questions at this point? I'm here all week. And what I mean by stopping the airflow, Homeflash here, if I may, has a tab that attaches to the rough sill plate on the inside, covers the whole sill, all one piece to the outside. So our goal is to give you the closed cell foam slope combined with the waterproofing membrane. Our shims are self-adhering onto this surface. So I think pretty proud we've came up with a solution that complies with a lot of the needs, complies with the code, very cost effective and very quick to put in. It's a very DIY product. But I wanted, again, to demonstrate the need of insulating that rough opening at the sill plate. I inform our clients that it's far better to provide a catch, drain, and dry than insulate that, because you're really losing very little, provided you've got a dead airspace in there. Anybody challenge me on that? Any questions? Okay.
Well, I think it's probably a really good idea to tie in the heel of the window to the vapor barrier on the inside.
Exactly.
And then you're
Yeah.
right.
So in combination with the flap for our back down, we recommend acoustical sealant to be used because it's there anyway, where the jam extension of the window comes into contact with our back down, which is a back down, not a mid down, but a back down. So anyway, point being, for those individuals that say we got to spray foam the entire rough opening of that window because of the heat loss and et cetera, it just didn't make any. Another question, like I said, I wanted to get some feedback from everybody in your candid thoughts, but I run into this one as well. You know, the age-old problem of theoretical versus science, practical versus science. The builders always say, well, the architect is ultimately responsible. The engineer on record or the architect stamping my drawings is ultimately responsible. They take all the problems off of my shoulders. I will never end up in a position of litigation. Wrong. Again, as I told you earlier, I've talked with a number of law firms that handle these cases, and they go, the first person we call is the permit holder, regardless of drawings or stamps or anything like that. Question I have is, what's more important? And maybe this is for Paul, building code or an engineer on record, stamped architectural drawings of that nature? I'm still kind of scrambling to get a definitive answer on that.
Well, code is minimum.
Is the minimum.
Yeah.
So,
And it has prescriptive requirements.
Right.
If it's not prescriptive and it's designed, then there is a certain responsibility statement and a professional.
so, and again, this is a learning curve for me, talking with a builder stating that the building code is minimum. If you want to build to over that, then that's where the architect or engineer record would come in and assist you. Would they not have to demonstrate that their system meets or complies with that minimum standard? They would have to demonstrate that and prove that. Am I correct?
Meet or exceed.
Meet or exceed. And that is on the shoulders of the sign of record. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that point, because I get that again, another one of these ones out of the playbook that keeps coming at me is that whatever the architect prescribes is gold. I'm covered, and I'm going, no, you've got to meet the minimum and demonstrate. Go ahead.
So not with respect to part 9, but with respect to part 3 buildings where there is an architect and there's a general services package.
Yep.
Everything to do with the windows, they kind of want to follow it off onto the contractors installing the windows and the manufacturer.
Right.
Right. And so when you talk to the architect and you say to them, you can get in a really heated argument with an architect.
Oh, yeah.
Just by saying, here's the schedules, here's the building code schedules and letter of assurance. And if you do not hire a supporting registered professional to sign off on this stuff, you're responsible. And they'll say, no freaking way. I'm not responsible for that.
I've seen this movie before.
I've
Yeah.
got like a 500-page document, you know, and randomly inserted in there is like the contractor's responsible for all of this stuff. And
Right.
Wash my hands for it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's like I said, that's a movie I've heard before, but part 9 is my world. I live in that kind of space and continuously hearing that, particularly with the multifamily segment of the market. Is the builder ever absolved? Never. Getting back again, bouncing around, apologize, you know, just talking about this, getting back to the physicality. If you were to see some of the framing that I've seen, particularly in out east, it'd be frightening, but it goes back to my point of creating a catch, drain and dry system and sloping that to get that water out of there. This is a picture of what I was talking about earlier in Homeflash. No, the picture may not demonstrate, but the compression of the jam extension against the back dam of Homeflash. And then from there forward, you have a 6-degree slope. Our shims are adhered. They carry the load of the glass. No need to nail or puncture through it. It's attached onto the inside. So we're checking a lot of good boxes off, but I thought after all this talk, I better show you something that I'm here to sell maybe. So that's our product comes in rolls. We include the shims. An interesting debate with us right now is some require or would prefer a liquid applied corner gusset. Liquid applied corner gusset, which we can provide. Again, thanks to my friends at Tremco for helping orchestrate that. Or we also have the traditional WRB corner gussets. Here's another closer shot, again, of our product on a subsill. So in essence, the Homeflash is bonded to the sill plate. It's attached to the inner part of the sill plate. It folds up and over and follows the slope down. We, particularly in Toronto, I keep going back to that because it's a new market for me and I'm always mesmerized by the difference in how they look at things there. And the number one point that they wanted with a system, permanent system, because they had been jumping around a lot, was the speed of install. They wanted a product that was going to go in extremely fast and quick because they wanted to get that product sold as fast as they could. Didn't care about the price. Disregarded pretty much everything else I was there for. They just wanted assurances that we could provide a very rapid. So without digressing too much further, that's again another picture of Homeflash on the sill. An installation, real briefly here, the piece is placed across the rough opening. We cut and remove the segments so that the foam flaps nice and snug between the trimmer studs. Again, the picture may not help you, but if you could imagine this particular section folding back onto the rough sill, that's a peel and stick liner being removed there. The corner's been cut out. It lies on the inside against the trimmer stud and you apply your corner gussets, whether that's a liquid applied, which I prefer, versus the peel and stick. Why? I'm not sold 100% on peel and stick unless it's primed on a vertical surface. Is 20 years ago when I got into this, I couldn't understand why peel and sticks weren't sticking to OSB. Well, a phone call to a major manufacturer in BC revealed to me, as part of the process of making OSB, they put in waxes, formaldehydes, and resins. And the goal was to deter adhesion, to deter water penetration. Well, the bonding elements for the OSB in short also didn't help with adhesion of peel and sticks. That's why we lovingly call it peel, stick, and staple. In this particular case, we're using a corner gusset. It's a peel and stick. It's summer. They work great in the summer. Liquid applied corner gusset again. Most important critical for our certified installers is to make sure none of the moisture comes down the trimmer stud and gets underneath our sill pan. That is probably the most critical component. Once it's installed, the shims are put in place. This particular example, again, now we've got one piece. You're not putting a skirting of, if I may, Tyvek, another skirting of Henry Blueskin, whatever else. This is all one product, one component, one system. Yes, Dave.
Suppose the sill plate is not very level or it's going up and down and stuff.
Great question, and I would expect nothing less from a window manufacturer. I have builders that go, well, my sill plates are never bang on. They're always, maybe 3/8 or a half an inch out. Going, okay. So would you expect all your trades to cover up poor workmanship? and move on with your installation of product? No, Homeflash does not cover up bad workmanship. And the back of your sticker, I believe on the window says, at the very least, plumb, level, and square. The rough sill plate shall be level. So that's my response to the builder when they say our framing is a little out of whack. Get a new framer. Because we don't like covering up poor workmanship, because it only reflects bad on adjusting your window at occupancy or during the 1-year walkthrough. So we don't like covering up bad workmanship. That's how I handle sill plates that are out of level. Again, you guys may be familiar, sorry, everybody may be familiar with typical installation. I kind of breezed through some photographs, but I just thought I'd throw this in there for dead air. Questions are raised about, well, the shim goes on, but the shim is at the slope of your sill plate or sill pan. And I'm going, no, the load of the window, the weight of the window compresses our shim into the foam. And therefore the shim, once the load is on it, is level with the sill plate, which is level. Therefore your window remains level. And the shims are placed in accordance with a combination, the window manufacturer or the code, or a combination of both. Because the performance of the window, in my opinion, is heavily reliant on where the shims are placed. And we could put shims on our system at any particular point. Again, the shim is compressed into the foam, not being nailed in, and ensures the window remains level with the rough sill plate. Okay, I'm getting close to the end. I didn't hear anybody clap or applaud, yay. The future of installations, post-secondary, PHBI, stronger enforcement, net zero wall designs may help in this. And of course, new innovations in technology. Just jumping back to post-secondary kind of springboards from the PHBI. I am involved with PHBI, Professional Home Builders Institute, and we're creating, I wouldn't call it a red seal, but it's an installation course for flange mounted or non-flanged windows, or maybe it's just flanged alone. We're meeting this week and going to talk a little bit more. People know Daryl Paul, a few people may. There's a group of us getting together, have got together to put together this with the help of PHBI. We're trying to create something that works for the 90% of the market. We're never going to create a window installation program that's going to check all the boxes across the country. It's just too monumental an idea. And I think to that point is our efforts with CSA and trying to come up with a window installation and, you know, that whole fun thing. It's painstaking, but PHBI has decided to undertake something of a smaller magnitude and deal with the bulk of window and door installations in the Western provinces. And that's moving along nicely. I think that'll be adopted by Nate and SAIT, much like the moisture control course was, and at least create an educational program that I'm hoping framers will be forced to take. If not, the migration of professional window installers like we see in Ontario will have to take something like that so that there's a common understanding of how a window should be installed so that it will perform appropriately and mitigate water damage. So PHBI is working on that. The next round of CSAs will be out when it's out. And like I said, there's some stuff in the works that hopefully will contribute to education and not just, as the pictures demonstrated a little earlier, a Wild West, truly a Wild West. And as long as you see peel and stick at the bottom of the window, you think everything is hunky-dory. Not the case. Not the case. Why? I've got a lot of, I would like to say, good friends that are in the large tract builder arena still. And we have discussions about the warranty departments are still flourishing with people. It tells you something. It isn't just about bad drywall and paint and roof leaks. Window leaks are still a major problem, and major is putting it mildly. Told you we're close to being at the end. Anyway, hopefully I didn't bore you too much, but I wanted to bring a little more 20 years of installing your products to the forefront and just giving you a snapshot of what I've had to go through as an entrepreneur and trying to create some traction on how to better install your windows so that you're not overburdened with warranty claims and being involved in this. I don't know how many of you have been in there. Is it the frame or is it the window that's leaking or is it, is it the way it was detailed? That still continues to this day to be a problem and you don't want to be a part of that. Being in the warranty side of it, 80% was being a mediator, negotiator, 20% was construction. Let the window guys or the builder worry about it. I'm here to mediate because homeowners were livid and it was no fun being a part of that program. So that's why Homeflash and envelope seal was born. I knew there was a need to provide a better window installation. There had to be. We couldn't continue in the industry with what it was. And I think to my point in conclusion is we see legislation now, minimum 5-year billing envelope. The CSA. I had originally went to PHBI months ago now and said, I think can we discuss the possibilities of a course of some sort or fashion aimed at window installations to kind of leverage everything else that's going on around us. And it was about 48 hours. I got an answer and I went, absolutely. Let's get on this. Let's make this happen. So the board, whomever that may be, decided that, yeah, this was a hot potato. We needed to see this happen. So we're getting some traction. We're doing very well. We're finally in the east and coming west and maybe in the middle we'll all meet. But hopefully everybody got something out of that and it wasn't too dry, but just an idea of what goes into making your window perform better and manage that water when it gets into the wall is an issue. It may only happen once in a while, but when it does happen, cover your ears. I said there was going to be bad language. Shit hits the fan. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for listening to what I brought to the table after 20 years. And I'm done March 1st. So there you go. Thank you. Oh, we got a new product too. Goes into the rough opening. Sorry, so new. I forgot about it. Onto the trimmer studs of the window or door prior to the window. And we already have the tab involved to over onto the flange. Forgive me. I forgot to point this out because it's so new. The ink isn't even dry on this. But we have this available too to deal as a system. Thank you. Sorry, everybody. Thanks. Everybody. Microphone.
Homeflash.ca, is that the website?
.com.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Couple of things, as Richard was talking, spurred my memory. Conservation Canada is also working with PHBI currently. We're working on a installer training program, not an installation training program. So it's focused on the tools that an installer needs to be proficient in, those details. So it doesn't talk about things like the installation practices. It talks more about and leans more towards training an installer to have good practices. So that's in the works. We've been at it for a couple of years, actually. PHBI hopes to have a draft of their curriculum out before June. So we're hoping to present at the AGM, and maybe by the end of this year, it'll be ready to go and deliverable out there. And then the other item was Richard was good enough to mention enforcement. Such a dirty word when you have government in the room. I said it was bad language. So next week or this week, and I'm track days. We've convened a group across the country. There's about 6 or 7 of us, I think, that are going to get together on a call for Patrick Flannery at Fenestration Review. They're doing a magazine article on enforcement of window code across the country. So I'm just curious because I've got a few Alberta manufacturers in the room. I'd love to hear where you think Alberta is with code enforcement on windows and doors. Anybody have experiences with Dave? I'm sure you've got some.
Yeah. Well, with the
2010 code cycle, whenever that went in here, Alberta 2014, they started to say that you need to have some kind of a membrane at the sill. Before, they weren't insisting on that. And also, most importantly, that you need to tie in your vapor barrier on the interior with the heel of the window or whatever in the window represents the vapor barrier. Now, at that point, they started to look at whether the jam liner was an integral part of the frame. and started to insist that manufacturers, if that was not an integral part of the frame, that you seal that joint with some kind of a tape. So that's all they're looking for. They want to see some kind of flashing at the sill. They want to make sure the jam liner is sealed to the window, and we're very much a jam liner market here in Alberta. And they want to make sure that the interior vapor barrier is sealed to the window. But if you go and take a close look, that's the most horrible detail of all, that they're using that sonic or whatever the seal, right? And you know, you've crudely cut the moisture, the vapor barrier, and then you're like, it's like a kid throws a crayon at a coloring book and calls it a piece of art, you know. If you look at it, it's huge gaps all over the place.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
they want to
that's,
see people making the motions.
Yeah.
But
but that's specific to installation, which is fine. Like, are
Yeah.
they enforcing installation requirements? But I'm talking more in general. What are you guys in Alberta seeing as far as NAFS enforcement, as far as energy performance enforcement by the building officials? Are your products required to be labeled? That's kind of the information that I'm trying to gather, right? As we have this call. So
well,
anybody?
I would say we saw, when NAFS first came in, we saw an enforcement blitz. And then when the energy performance requirements came in, they totally forgot about NAFS and
Yeah.
totally concentrated on the energy. And I don't know if we're seeing any type of when something new comes along, there's a burst of enforcement, right? And then once they've assured themselves that people are behaving in the marketplace, then they stop looking so closely at those things. I think the key thing is these are safety codes officers, right? They're looking for stuff that's going to kill the occupants.
Yeah.
Right? Like, is the furnace of the gas is going to go the wrong way and you get carbon monoxide poisoning, or, you know, is the fireplace going to draw air from the wrong place and from the furnace, or is the electrical system going to electrocute you in the bathtub? Those are the things that are right at the top of what they want to enforce. And a window, you know, bad window installation can cause the wall to rot. That's never going to kill anybody, right? So they have their priorities, right?
Yeah,
It's what's
yeah.
going to kill people.
So are windows going into residential buildings in Alberta NAFS labeled? Mostly?
I would think so.
Yeah, yeah. Energy performance labeled? NFRC or CSA, most guys are labeling. Okay.
No, it's on the window.
Oh, okay, okay. But as far as building official enforcement of the performance grade or the water penetration, anybody you run into?
New permits. The new permits you pull, the building inspectors and building officials are pretty tight on it. They look for your NAFs. And if you're missing any of the label regarding your NAFs or Energy Star or thermal, they ask for a letter or they want the labels back.
Okay.
So we see it's been consistently being applied or being enforced.
Yep.
And sometimes.
Now, is that mostly Calgary or you're all over the province?
Fernie just the other day.
Yeah, the Fernie recent one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah, the Kootenays, I know, they've always actually been pretty tough. That's surprising to me
Seen
that
that,
an
yeah.
area like that would be like that.
I think glass on glass guards and stairwells has been
That's become a much bigger deal. Yeah,
That's
the
a big
last
one.
5 years, certainly in BC, that we've seen a significant increase. Attention being paid to guard rules.
That's a big one. Like, you know, we see maybe once a week something is coming up regarding
Really?
the guard.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes we have to change the glass, but there's no clear directions on this. It's kind of a vague for us also. So we're looking for professional help on this, like, you know, have some kind of a flip page kind of a thing. You go ABC instead of not going through the circles of building codes,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
section A and refer to building code number 3, then appendix A, you know.
That's right.
That does remind me that that's mainly what we're seeing right now. Glazing in stairwells and landings.
Yeah.
Apparently someone who was in the glass railing industry informed some safety codes official in Alberta that tempered glass in a glass railing in an infill panel to a glass railing needed to be minimum 5 millimeters thick, tempered to withstand guard loads. And then so a bunch of other safety codes officers, if they see anything less than 5 millimeter, They want a letter from someone like a professional engineer saying this window is being designed to meet guard loads. And you can, we write that letter. I mean, we have professional engineers on staff, but we're looking for minimum 4 millimeter tempered in to meet guard loads. And that's just because there's finite element analysis programs out there. And if you crunch the numbers to meet the 1/2 kilonewton load, which is the load for infill panels, not the main guard. Yeah, you need 4 mil tempered generally to meet that requirement. So, but I don't know what people are doing where they don't have an engineer on staff to sign that.
Well, what my experience was, and what we ended up doing in my former life, because we were running into a number of those challenges from building officials after the window was in the building. And now to try and prove it, get an engineer out there to look at it. I mean, the cost and the difficulty was really challenging. So we worked with our engineer who was third party, didn't work for our company. And then we worked with the MEPLA software, which is what you're talking about, right? Glass design software. And we would do that work in-house, design it using MEPLA, use that glass. And then we worked with our engineer that if we got challenged by a building official, we would provide the production documents showing what the glass was and the MEPLA report. And he just had a boilerplate sign, boom. And it was really easy.
So they weren't looking for a letter from a professional engineer?
A letter, but it wasn't sealed. It was just a letter that agreed to what we were showing was accurate for the guard load requirement. And it was really easy.
That's good feedback. So
yeah,
MEPLA, in case anybody doesn't know, MEPLA.
Yeah,
it's free software.
Free software. You can design your glass for guard load. And if you've got an engineer that's prepared to work with you on that, it was really easy. And then we just do all of them like that. And, you know, we get the odd challenge, show it to the engineer. He has a letter, signs it. We're done. Paul.
Yeah, on that, not sure who said somebody brought up, 5 millimeters or 4 millimeters. Is that in Alberta? Yeah. That somebody pointed that out to an SEO and then they went with it, sort of thing?
That's what happened.
Okay, well, that's where our office would look at that and look at a consistency, whether it's 4 or 5 or whatever it's got to be. Or we look at when you're having, oh, I can do 4 here, or I got to engineer it, or 5 here. We'll look at that, or somebody could send me some information and look at a consistent. If it's tempered glass, it's made under a standard. What is the appropriate thickness? And it will change on different sizes.
That's exactly it.
But
it's not the same.
Or have we got some consistency we can look at in residential guards or something of that?
And that was the challenge, is that the thickness can change with the size of the window and actually where the sill of that window is, how big it is. So we found that being able to do that work in MEPLA and locate it in the right spot where the guard load impact is, all those things would change depending on what that product was.
So
it just
basically, if you have a horizontal member that is at or near the guard height, like a mullion, you can say that's taking the full guard load, which is 1 kilonewton, right? And then any glass below that takes the guard load for infill panels, which is 0.5 kilonewtons, right? If you have a window that doesn't have that horizontal, then you might very well need 5 mil glass
or
even 6 mil.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it can change depending on the design, the size, where the sill of that window is. So,
software, it's not free.
MEPLA, yeah, MEPLA. I can send you the link for it. No, I've got it. There's a free version. You're right. There's a free version that will give you the tools to do what we're talking about. MEPLA ISO. So. Was there anything else that I wanted to talk about? No, I don't think so. Okay, so we have Paul Chang here from Ministry of. Do you want a little break? Little bathroom break? You guys want to take a break for a second? Good, then I'll bring up Paul's session and we'll 5 minutes and we'll sit back.
Yeah, go bigger than that. Don't need to see me. Yeah, I need to see it more than that. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Paul Chang with Alberta Municipal Affairs. My title is called Provincial Building Administrator. Just to go through municipal affairs, a little bit of a hierarchy. Our current minister is Rebecca Schultz. Deputy minister is Brenda Cox. Assistant deputy minister Sean Iwasiuk. Executive director Steve Murphy, and who I directly report to, my director is James Orr. So that's whoever's premier is there up top. So go through that. And in our group, we have our director. There's myself as provincial building administrator. We have an administrator for barrier-free accessibility. I have 10 staff. One gentleman in Edmonton is the energy code specialist, and 9 other technical advisors. So there's engineers and architects. One of the gentlemen is a carpenter. So we got a full gamut of professionals. 7 of them are safety codes officers in the building discipline. Myself, I'm a safety codes officer in the building, plumbing, gas, and fire discipline. So we have, as provincial building administrator, it's a statutory position that's authorized through ministerial order. And that provides me the authority for writing such things as standards that makes it become, basically it is law as it comes into effect. And when I make a decision on an interpretation, that interpretation is good across the province. So Terry and I will be discussing a few other things and down the road. So I deal with, even though it says I'm the highest technical expertise on matters, it just means that it's my authority to make decisions on things where I rely on staff, I rely on stakeholders that I deal with. Also, there's the building subcouncil that I rely on that's covers the stakeholder groups across the whole province. So on that, I also deal with, other than the province itself, I do deal with other provinces, territories, and if necessary, anything international, which I presented on last July. I presented at a Canadian-US summit that was going on. So I guess that was some of the things that was talked about is the Safety Codes Act and Building Code Regulation. Who's responsible? So that question was brought up, is the builder absolved? Is anybody absolved? Under the Safety Codes Act, that's all those are freely available on the King's printer. There is responsibilities laid out within the act. The owner, builder, designer, the contractor, and it lays out responsibilities of the government and municipalities, and as well as the safety codes officers. So that responsibility is laid out within the act under law. The building code regulation, it is a regulation that brings into effect the applicable building code. And with the timely code adoption under the Alberta system, it references the code, and then under that code, the Safety Codes Act then refers to the code as applied by the regulation as amended from time to time. So when we come out with a new code, that's amending the one that's referenced in the building code regulation. And so the regulation is the one that brings into effect the building code and the National Energy Code for buildings. So the building code, that's the national 2020 National Building Code of Canada, comes in 2 volumes. Of course, you're all aware they're freely available, download online, as well as the Alberta versions of the building code. Partly last cycle, we had the code ready, but it was delayed by a month because we knew they were going to be free. So instead of selling it for a month and then trying to give people their money back, we delayed ours by a month because we were aware they're going to come out free. And the previous codes are also available online. So I made available to NRC some of our documents that they didn't have. And on our website for safety codes, we have the Alberta versions directly linked, but you could go on the NRC site, get their previous codes, their users guides, intent statements, different things that are available. And it's all online, free from NRC. Okay, so this is still a work in progress. The National Building Code 2019 Alberta edition is what we're currently under. We are in process of working on the new code, which would be the 2022 Alberta edition. And that is based mainly on the model code of the 2020 National Building Code of Canada with Alberta specific additions. Some of the main things is mainly in part 3, where residential buildings in part 3 are all sprinklered. They don't have where you have a 4-story building that can be built unsprinkled. They have to be sprinkled. So that's in part 3 of the building code. The allowance for secondary suites, the National Building Code was restricting your percentage that you could have of the house as secondary suite. We took that out. It's just built the proper way, but it didn't say you can only have 20% or so as your secondary suite. So things like that. The barrier-free section 3.8, we have a lot of Alberta specifics because the national code has not been adjusted for probably 15 or 20 years in regards to barrier-free accessibility. And our code is a higher standard for the barrier-free accessibility. Some of the changes to the 2020 National Building Code of Canada actually mimic what we had in our code for some time now. So these are the codes we're working with in the development of the next code. So we'll have the previous version, the 2015 National Building Code of Canada. We have the 2020 National Building Code of Canada. We have the 2019 Alberta edition, and we compare all those documents to see what's new and new or changed or relocated or removed within those 3 codes, as well as what we're going to put into the next code. So from the 3 codes of 1,500 pages each, we do various comparisons using software, of course, and we do end up with manual work on certain things when the software can't pick it up. And that's how we develop our next code. So there's a lot of work going on in the development of that next code cycle. So we have modifications, so change, update, relocation. The adoption, additions for new requirements. In the national code, you'll see the small lines beside the code reference. That means it's a new code reference. And if you go into the Alberta edition, the bold lines on the side are Alberta specific references. So we also have replacement and deletion, and nothing shows where it's deleted. In our last code update information, we presented the 3-column document on the Safety Codes Council site, which also included information of what was deleted and the why. So that's still available on the Safety Codes Council site, and we can talk more about that later. So these codes are all free online, of course, the national codes and the Alberta codes. And as well, I don't think I have the 2020 National Building Code of Canada is not in there, but that's all it's all available online. So we have editorial changes, the appendix, notes, attributions that are all part of the code. We go through all of that, and they're located after each part. Of course, the appendix are now called notes. And just a reminder that the notes are non-mandatory. They're just FYI, but they have caused or can cause confusion when some things aren't quite right, which Terry and I are working on. All parts except part 9 are and appendix C and D are in volume 1, so they broke the codes up. That was last cycle. Part 9 is all volume 2, quite a thick section. Okay, challenges and changes. Some of the challenges are dealing with adopting the Alberta specific requirements and incorporating them within the national model and the numerical, keeping the numerical format the same way, or put it into proper locations. So we tend to have certain things like the sprinkler requirements Where they had buildings that said, if you build it this way without sprinklers for residential, part 3, we just marked those as reserved instead of moving the numbers around. So we'd leave those as, well, marked reserved, not quite like. Cross-reference conflicts due to numberings and deletions and additions. Of course, you know, in the building code, you have the online version, you click a reference from in one sentence, they'll reference another code reference, you click it, it goes back, it can go back and forth pretty good. But when we have the Alberta specifics, we also have to make sure that reference goes back and forth when there's an Alberta specific added that has a cross-reference somewhere in the code. So we work with NRC, they're doing the publication and the printing of any of the documents. And we're working with their editorial department on all this documentation. So we'll have our drafts go to them, they redraft it, and it'll come back and forth a few times before we have the final edition. So hopefully this time we'll get it done in a couple of drafts. Last time we got it done in 3 drafts, which was actually pretty good because we were initially told we were skipping a code cycle. Then in January, they said, we're not skipping a code cycle and we want it done for April. So all of a sudden we were scrambling. For yourselves, there's going to be standards updates for Windows. So that's just identified the newer standards that are being referenced. So that you'll see it in the National Building Code of Canada. We are following their lead on that. So we don't have anything different. Part 9, there's a lot of, or actually for this standard, it's related to safety glazing. It used to be called safety glass and tempered glass, I believe. And now it's all safety glazing. So there's, of course, you're familiar with the same standards, but the updated references. Some Alberta specifics. Don't think there's anything applies directly to yourselves. Of course, I mentioned the secondary suites. Non-operable openable windows between attached garage and a dwelling unit. That's not identified in the National Building Code, but basically you have to keep your fume barrier between the two. And maybe somebody wants to put a window in, and you can, as long as you make it non-operable and the fume barrier is continuous. So typically that'd be your vapor barrier. The HRF, or high intensity residential fires, that was implemented in the Alberta 2006 code partway through. And some of that has been implemented in the National Building Code of Canada. That again is specific to high intensity fires between dwelling units. And there's more of a concern now that we have houses getting built closer together. So there's a few things being looked at that actually in exterior insulation for buildings on existing buildings that would actually make them closer, technically closer. But we're going to look at that in using non-combustible siding if you have the same heat intensity from one building to the other. And the windows would not go to the outboard, but they would stay where the original wall is. So there's that spatial separation issue. And if you're replacing a window, then it would still stay on the inboard, which I think is a typical design for the cold climate design, is to have the window more on inboard anyway. So that's being looked at now with some fire modeling. We have some insulation values for heated, attached, and detached garages. Again, that falls under high intensity residential fire requirements to put drywall in the garages. So in doing that, we made a requirement to also put in insulation, but it doesn't have to be insulated to the energy code requirements because the drywall is there for the fire and the insulation vapor barrier is there to reduce the condensation levels from inside. So it's not a insulation for the energy code requirements. So we have reduced values for those. Ventilation rough-in fan for future development of a bathroom. It was one of those things in the plumbing code, you have to put a rough-in for future vent. So why not have the rough-in for a future fan instead of having to try and cut it in after the fact? So that was pretty simple. Log construction. In the National Building Code of Canada, log construction has certain standards and also under the energy code requirements that's exempt in Alberta. So we have our specific section for log construction, which exempts anything from the energy code. Well, not anything, but most things in regards to the wall itself. Okay, energy efficiency. Currently, we're under the NACB 2017 for buildings and section 936 of the 2019 Alberta edition for housing and smaller buildings. And of course, we're moving forward to the NACB 2020, and that'll be section 936 of the future code 2022 Alberta edition. And that will be based on the National Building Code of Canada. That will have the tiers, the 5 tiers within the code. And the end of this month, the cabinet is meeting on the decision of which tier to select. So all the tiers will be in the code, but it will be reference of, we'll be told which tier is going to be selected. So we're waiting for a couple of decisions from cabinet before we can complete the code, but we're working on everything else as we're moving along anyway. Some of the changes to Part 9 for housing and small buildings, changes to the MBC 2019, which will come into effect based on the 2020 National Building Code of Canada. Types of glazing and protection of shower doors and bathtub doors and windows or glass in there. It would be safety glazing. Previously, we did have in Alberta, the 2019 code currently states is safety glass under the CGSB standing or tempered glass. The national code just says it had to be safety glass and it didn't have a standard. So we did have the standard. So now the National Building Code has referenced the standard, which is same CGSB standard now called safety glazing. I think one of the questions we've had before is if you put a window, if you're on an outside wall and somebody puts a window in there, what is the requirement of the glass in the window? So I think that's covered off typically under other parts of the code where if you have a window to an outside wall, or what kind of protection would you need, especially in a slippery tub or shower, if you fall against it, if it's low enough that you could injure yourself. Typically those windows are higher because down lower, it's not very good unless you have the frosted one. But that's something it's not clearly identified in the code. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
So yeah, there's some controversy, like safety glazing is required in a shower or a tub enclosure.
Yes.
But we have seen instances where there's a window above the sink, let's say, and safety codes officers have said, well, the whole room, the whole bathroom, as far as we're concerned, is a shower or tub enclosure. Or they say, you know, you get out of the tub, your feet are still wet. You get out of the tub, you slip, you go across to the window. Maybe it's not over a sink, maybe it's by the sink, you know, and so that causes some controversy. So what is the proper interpretation?
Well, we would interpret that the window in the enclosure would fall under certain requirements depending on the height above the standing surface of that tub or shower.
Yep.
But a window in a bathroom is a window in a bathroom.
That's what I figured. Yeah.
If it's something where it's being interpreted by a safety codes officer, and that would be individual or someplace here, and here, that's where our office comes into working with industry and education and safety codes officers on consistency. If it's required, we'd say, yeah, it's all required, or it's not required. But we would look at that it's consistent one way or another. My answer is that it's not required except unless it's in the tub or shower enclosure.
That's great. Because that's my interpretation.
Okay. So it's great because it goes with your interpretation. Oh. Okay. That's the one? Oh, okay. Now, actually, this was a minor change. It was installation of windows, doors, and skylights, where the only change was the word also. They did talk about all the other information was in there, but it would lead you to believe that it conforms to one section or not the other, but all this applies. So that minor change or that one word will make people look at everything, whereas the way it was written before wasn't quite clear. So that's the minor change. I just wanted to point that out, and it would have the little line beside it, even though it's one word. Oh, here we go, Terry. Hang on to them. Okay. These, the two here, the first one is required guards. I was asked by window manufacturer, when does the glass or glazing have to be safety glazing if it's a manufactured window? And it doesn't say directly that if you put a window in and it's low to the ground, it has to be a guard. Now the numbers now are being changed from 450 to 900. So typically, if it's serving as a guard, because it does say a surface which access is provided, which if you're up higher, that's your living room floor, then it does talk about the height. So that's something we're looking at on clarifying, like now with the new height of 900 coming in, that might be a non-issue coming up. But the lower height before, the window is a window and the wall is a guard, and a guard is a guard, but they're trying to say it's just a window. But if you bounce against it, you could end up going through. So that hasn't been written down anywhere, but I think that's addressed in the new code. Okay, sentence 4. This is the new one that was rewritten to talk about the unopenable or openable windows in buildings to be restricted to 4 inches and not being able to be adjusted without special knowledge control of free swing to, or actually 100 millimeters. Because 4 inches is 103 or 101, 101.7 or something. But at 100 millimeters, it's that's the number now being used, and it's just a soft conversion. So that's something that Fenestration Canada is submitting into the National Research Council, and we'll look at it as well. But at this time, we will be harmonizing to the National Research Council or National Building Code of Canada in regards to the code reference. Moreover, though, is the notes. Don't need to read it. I can't read it from here. And basically the notes was probably the more of an issue of contention from Fenestration Canada because it provided confusing information. So we're going to look at that and work with Fenestration Canada on adjusting the notes. We can work with that fairly easy because it's not a code requirement. But like I said, even though they're not code requirement, and a safety codes officer or builder or installer or whatever reads this as well, this doesn't make sense. They don't really jive. And we're trying to adjust that with some wordsmithing or moving some things around. So we're working with actually one of the developers of the actual code proposal that went from Alberta to the National Research Council. So it did come from Alberta, and that gentleman is no longer a safety codes officer, but he's still in the industry. He's actually on a standing committee with NRC. And I reached out to him, and he said he'll help us look at that and suggested we could work with the notes at this time. And Terry's gonna be on my case anyways. Okay, so building regulations require a glass in certain locations is safety glass. This is something we'll look at. It's not really clear in part 9. But I wanted to bring that up is that with the new requirement, that's probably going to be taken care of for part 9 buildings. It will depend on some more discussion on this topic, but I just thought I'd bring that forward. This is an old slide talking about performance of doors with limited water ingress control. And I think you pointed out that based in Alberta, we don't get any rain. but water does go sideways when it's getting wind induced. So this will take care of certain situations, but that's something else we'll look at for Alberta requirements or lack of requirements. You know, it's always good.
Could imitate BC. So BC, they simplified it. They said wherever head flashing is not required, you can eliminate water door.
Yeah.
So that-
Yeah, so that depends on if you have soffits and stuff like that. So we beg, borrow, and steal where we can as well, like if you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Okay, that was so we got some added notes to clarify the requirements. Exterior door, infiltration, precipitation, ingress. And I think that's it for part 9. And okay, the change. Oh yeah, change clarified requirements for main entrances, because a lot of those do have an overhang. Okay, I'll just go through that really quick. You're providing this on your site anyways. Okay, and just to let you know, I was supposed to be working on this 2 weeks ago when I got notified. I got it done Saturday afternoon. So I haven't really had a chance to go through it really good. And just bear with me on this. Okay, so the NBC 2019 Alberta edition, NBC 2020. So there's slight changes in values for energy efficiency, very slight change as well. This one is for skylight. So again, a very slight change. So nothing drastic. We will be looking at chances are we're probably around a tier 1 level, but that will get clarification and direction at after the cabinet meeting this end of this month. Okay. Energy performance changes coming in the next code. Of course, there'd be tiered energy performance, dealing with tier 1 basically is what we have now, because it's just getting called tier 1 because right now we just have the one level. So that'll be tier 1. And then of course you have your steps to give you certain performance increase. At this time, there is tier 1 and 2 have prescriptive requirements in the code, but just as an FYI, the National Research Council is working on prescriptive requirements for the higher tiers. They've been tasked to look into that, so that by then we would hopefully see some prescriptive requirements for the higher tiers, but that's just in the works. So the other one is NBC's subsection 936.5 is now aligned with the EnerGuide rating system, makes specific reference to the EnerGuide rating system and EnerGuide Hot 2000, I believe it's called, as an acceptable method, where we did not have in the previous code, but we did issue a standard that said EnerGuide using Hot 2000 was an acceptable method, and we had a bit of a additional requirement, but that's going to all go by the wayside because it's going to be referenced in the code. So we had already referenced it by standard, but now it's going to be referenced, so you're copying us again. Part 3, I'm not sure how many of you are working in part 3, but there's a few changes coming in that as well. Combustible components for exterior walls. Typically you talk about the combustible cladding and certain combustible components in the exterior wall. One of the big changes is for non-combustible construction. Now, there's these articles to clarify some of the requirements, but for the window industry, if I get, that's the next slide. There are minor combustible components now. They include wood blocking intended for detachment of window elements and exterior wall assemblies. Before, that would not have counted. Now that they're allowing combustible windows in non-combustible buildings, or they have the window sashes and frames, new lips. The fact that they changed the title to combustible windows, glazing, and skylights. The windows before all had be non-combustible frames. And now you can use combustible frames because they found that that wasn't an issue when they're dealing with that. And it also moves along with energy efficiency, because of course, put in a metal frame and doesn't really matter what kind of window you put in. Okay, again, combustible window sashers and frames, and they provide the percentages on window openings. And the additional one is they're talking about construction of mass timber wall construction, because you have your non-combustible building and the new class of buildings. There's combustible, non-combustible. Now there's encapsulated mass timber construction, which there was issues with that because some of the fire service said, well, it's a wood building, it's going to burn, blah, blah, blah. We had to deal with that. And we did issue a stand data back in 2020, I believe it was, on permitting the construction of 12-story encapsulated mass timber buildings for Alberta prior to the National Building Code coming. Not that there's any that I know if that's been built, but they asked me if we could write one up, and we did. That was another thing that had to get done in a month, so higher ups. Transparent doors and panels, again, laminated tempered safety glazing, and they still have wired glass written in there, but they do have limitations on the wired glass. Okay, again, safety glazing, pretty well, the standards changed to safety glazing throughout. And this is the one that's new to code for part 3. It talks about where you need safety glazing in windows on exterior walls or any wall, because they do talk about the bottom exposure of the glazing is located not, or it has to be located more than 1525, where typical guard is 1070. So this is actually asking for safety glazing higher than what would be a guard height. And this is new to the National Building Code of Canada. And that's something that'll be part 3 buildings. So that then supports the requirements for safety glazing in part 9, but part 9 would have a lower limit. Again, same requirement. Now they'll just tell you where what's shown needed. Okay. Protection of openable windows. Again, this is in part 3. And this one is not exactly the same as part 9, because it doesn't talk about using special tools or knowledge or the lack thereof. But that's still pointed out as part 3. So that's something we'll look at. Or actually, this one's just going to be carried over. It's already in part 3 of the building code. Okay, revolving doors. That's going to have specific safety glazing and where it's required. New to the NBC 2020 reference again was, and it was already in National Building Code Alberta edition, was we were referring to showers and bathtub enclosures to meet the CGSB standard, where they didn't have a standard reference in the National Building Code. Now they are, and a new standard on safety glazing. Okay, just a quick minor information. Adaptable dwelling units is an Alberta specific requirement in our barrier-free section. It talks about if you get government funding, at least 10% of the units have to be adaptable. So that's one of the Alberta specific. So we have a few others in the barrier-free section. Here is the partnerships, Alberta Municipal Affairs. So, and I'm the representative for Alberta Municipal Affairs. I'm not a member of the sub-council. It's the sub-council is the technical council from the Alberta Safety Codes Council. And this one will be the building sub-council. And so the partnerships on there, the stakeholder seats includes all the above, which is engineers, architects, contractors, safety codes officers, representative for general public, fire officials, large industrial, energy, seed, consumer protection, builders and developers. So the gamut of stakeholders from across the province is covered by the various associations.
So the people who are on the building sub-council, they're selected?
Now their association puts their name forward to represent on that criteria of the matrix. And when their name is put forward, it could be if it's one association like the professional or PEGA, they'll put a name or two forward, and then the sub-council themselves would go in camera and review the resumes and pick one. If it's only one person, they'll review the resume, and likely that person is a representative of that association. I think on the energy seat, we had 2 associations. So each of them put in a name, and then one of them got selected. I don't know the criteria because I'm not a member of the Safety Codes Council's sub-council. I attend there on behalf of municipal affairs. So pretty well, if I'm not there, the meeting doesn't happen because everything is revolving around them, questioning me on a lot of stuff. So it's just working towards getting issues with consistency, standards, whether from whichever part of the industry. The most recent one, the HVAC industry talked about some new ratings on the equipment. So we put out a standard on what the building code asks for and what the new ratings will say. And we cross-link them to say this means the same thing. So that was just recently put out. New code development process. That is, those are, oh, there it is. Oh, here. Used to be the code development process was working with the Canadian Commission of Building and Fire Codes. And from that, they would get input from anybody and everybody, associations, individuals for code change requests. But the new process, the Canadian Commission on Building Fire Codes has been dissolved, but they're in the process now. What they have is a new governance body. Does this thing work? It's not working. Okay, the top one is it's at the deputy minister's level from the provinces and territories, and a representative from NRC and a representative from the federal government. So that's the highest level to say, here's how we're working with the codes. Here's some priorities from the provinces and territories, not the other way around, where it used to be NRC would develop a model code and they say, here guys, you want to adopt this? And then some would say, no. And some will say, well, we like some of it. And now we're looking at the construction codes agreement, harmonization agreement, where the provinces and territories are already in the forefront and working with NRC to say, here's things we need to work at, that's priorities, that generally these codes will be adopted in a more harmonized manner. And we've also had to work on what's called a variations project to identify every difference in our code from the national code, and we're working on reducing those. So that would go through the deputy minister table. The new board is the code systems board that would be made up of some of the CCFB past members, but it will have representatives from every province and territory on there at a level that would deal with following the direction of the deputy minister's table to say, here's where we want to move from the code system. So we'll still have the technical committees, the standing committees that deal with all the technical issues, but the direction now is from the top down and the provinces and territories, as opposed from the side from NRC saying, here, do you guys want to adopt that? So that changes the model to also look at harmonization and the timely code adoption. All provinces and territories have signed up to after the National Building Code of Canada is issued within at least 2 years to have theirs adopted, either the National Building Code or their own within 2 years. So the parity across the provinces and territories, when you're moving from place to place, you're more aligned on, you're on the same code cycle. As well, the variations project, the intent is to identify what's different in each province and territory. So I go, oh, the National Building Code If I go to Alberta, oh, here's some of their things, but you can base it off the one document. Yeah, go ahead. Alberta has a 1-year emplacement from the publication of the Alberta edition. So we will probably be 2 years from the national, but that's because we're doing such a large amount of work on the variations and harmonization on this round. But the next round will, I'm hoping to move on. We don't have a specific date because we have to wait for the cabinet approval. So it will be before the end of this year. Okay, so stand data, I'm not sure how many of you were, it's just a term that's been made up. Some people call it a standard data. Previous administrator's name was ADA and they called it a standard by ADA. But basically it's a made up Alberta name for either variance, interpretation, or bulletin. And a bulletin is just an FYI, but variance and interpretation are applicable across the province, and interpretation saying, well, we're having different inconsistencies on this code reference, and the administrator says this is what it means, and then that holds the weight of should it go to any order enforcement or appeal, that would hold the weight of saying, well, this is the same meaning across the province. And a variance is to allow an alternative solution to something prescribed in the code and not necessarily addressed by the code. And in situations that are basically happening across the province and where we can, within the authority that I have, do an alternative solution. That's not necessarily myself making it up, but could be come from industry, which we'll work with different stakeholders. And we work with them in the drafting of the stand data. And then it goes through us to make sure it's written our proper manner, but a variance then is an option to follow that is applicable across the province, such as the variance allow the new schedules that have been issued. You can still use the schedules in the code, but both AAA and APEGA are promoting the new schedules, and they're having training on that for their user's guide. So AAA and APEGA are putting on training for anyone that deals with professionals and the schedules, and they're putting on the training information that's available to anyone. That was last year, and they're issued under a variance, so they're an option. But if that option is taken by the coordinating registered professional, then that option shall be followed throughout. It's not old, it's current.
So how do you get a copy of the new schedule?
Stand data. Yeah, I'll share some of that information later. You go to our website for building codes, and once you go under stand data and as a variance, the schedules are listed in there, both the variance and the schedules themselves. And you can go to Safe Codes Council site and go to a APEGA site, and you can go to AAA site. But AAA and APEGA have done up a user's guide or document in which they're providing webinars on. So we're working with them and the Safety Codes Council, and that was, I think it took about 2 years of meetings to work it out. But a lot of the current schedules have a lot of checklists that found that professionals were crossing them out, say not applicable, not applicable, not applicable. Those aren't there anymore. You sign off, you're signed off. But it also has where you could have a professional, say a structural engineer, and he gets another designated professional to do, say, the piles. Well, that registered professional of record is like a coordinating professional for their scope. They get all the other, there's an additional C3 schedule, but it doesn't have all these lists. They sign off their portion of the work, and all that's packaged up to the registered professional of record. All those registered professionals of record provide all that documentation to the coordinating professional, and all that documentation goes into this to the HJ.
Is this coordinating professional usually an architect or
Many times, but it's not necessarily so. It depends what's all involved in the project. It could just be a portion of the building that's all mechanical or all, it could be all structural, you know, maybe there's a renovation. Who knows, but most of the time it is. Excuse me a sec. Okay. Sorry. So, you mentioned Daryl Paul. The building envelope tie-in details is something that was developed with Daryl and the Siding Contractors Association of Alberta. So they have that, oh, excuse me. So I have this book on the tie-in details that's available on their website. I don't know how much it is, but we were asked to also review it to see if we had some input. So we did provide some input, but that is their document for additional tie-in details. Oh, sorry. So code harmonization process. We're working on that. Code review and analysis. That's basically what we're doing. Because it's all the codes, like I said, and we review the codes, compare the codes, and then come up with a new code. I think it's all acronyms in there. So it's just acronyms in there. Basically, we do technical calls for the various disciplines in building, fire, elevators. There's 11 different disciplines within our purview under the municipal affairs. This is just an example of some of the call logs that the building discipline. This is phone calls. We get about 4,000 a year. Probably double that with the emails we get. And that's just the first point of contact calls. So a call could go back and forth. Call could take 5 minutes. Call could take, oh, we got to look into some stuff. It could take some days back and forth. And same with the emails. It starts off simple question and it evolves, or sometimes the question isn't so simple and we have to research it a bit more. So anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 calls in the building discipline. And we have one person take the call, take turns on the call during the week. And if it's really busy, we'll add 2 people on the call. But if any question comes up, it could go through the team to review. And if the team can't agree on an answer, it ends up on my desk and then I have to pick one. So I usually flip a coin, pick one, just to come up with a consistent response where we can. So that's just another chart showing the building. We keep pretty busy. Again, another chart, 43% of the calls coming in is just the building discipline. So the building discipline includes heating, ventilation, air conditioning, fire sprinkler systems, anything in the building code that's referenced in the building code is what we deal with. Yeah.
So what percentage of these calls are where the code is clear, but the person making the call just doesn't have a clear understanding? 99%.
I don't think that, see that little white line? Well, we do get calls anywhere from the basic homeowner. They might get told something by, whether it's the safety or yourself. You get told something by the safety codes officer, oh, the windows in the bathroom has to be safety glazing. So you call into us and we look to say no, and we will provide an opinion. The information or response from the technical advisors is an opinion. The safety codes officer is the authority having jurisdiction. We don't override them. But if it's an interpretation from myself, then that holds a little more weight. But I don't take the calls. I get calls and I do end up taking calls as it goes through the system, but I'm not on the duty officer schedule. I get enough calls with them and with other things and guys like Terry.
Safety codes officer who says the window in the bathroom needs to be cleaned up.
We-
They say, well, what do you call Chang? I'm the boss here.
Well, it would come through that you would, email's the best because the phone now goes to a voicemail system due to the fact that it goes, it's other than the disciplines, goes through home warranty for a residential protection program. So that email, you go through, send it through to that email, and you let them know it's in the building discipline or whatever discipline it's in, and you pose your question that here's something that's provided to me, and the safety codes officer would have to say, well, you got to do this because of this code reference. And we will deal with what's either the clarification or ambiguity of the code reference. If they have no code reference, how are they going to write you an order? And now if the lack of clarity, they quote a code reference, but say now they apply it to the whole room, then it comes back to us and we could provide an opinion. If he was to write an order, then when I get asked to review it, chances are I would revoke it. Yeah, if you're written an order, there is a formal system that's written out that within 14 days of getting an order from a safety codes officer, you can ask for the administrator of that discipline to review it. It goes to the Safety Codes Council because they track everything. I can either uphold the order, vary the order, or revoke the order based on very certain criteria. And I have revoked some, I've upheld some, I've varied some, sort of depends on how the order is written. And it could be I agree with the situation, but it's wrong, it's written wrong. Then it's revoked or varied. Then should the order actually, I uphold the order and say, yeah, carry on, the order is written correctly, I don't see anything under the criteria I have to do any of those things. There is an appeal process on which you have 35 days from the issuance of the order to appeal through the Safety Codes Council, and then members of the sub-council, depends on if it's one or joint order, that would review it under an appeal panel, and it's quasi-judicial. So sort of follow the rules of the court, but the panel is the decision making. And in between there, if the order was to say you have to do something in 20 days, but you have 35 days to appeal, there is a process of requesting a stay of the order till the appeal is heard, because 35 days is to file to request an appeal. When the appeal actually happens would be a month or two later. So there's a request for a stay of appeal, and I get involved with that to make a recommendation to the chair of the applicable, or to the building sub-council, whether there's reason that an appeal could be, a stay of the order could be upheld. And it's typically around safety. If it's unsafe, no, they got to fix it. If it's not an unsafe condition, it's something that's just got to get fixed because it's wrong, and there's no imminent danger or unsafe condition, typically we could stay the order. So all that comes sort of crosses my desk.
So one of my questions for you was going to be about code interpretations, and that's obviously where this conversation is. In BC, the Building Officials Association of BC actually has a process, thanks, for this, where you can email in your question about an interpretation. They have a group of X number of professionals within the BC Building Officials Association that will review it and provide their interpretation. The nice thing about it is it's on a website, and you can go and just scroll through them and look for them and search them by code name and that, or by word. I'm wondering if this also has some kind of an online presence where if you have a question about an interpretation, can you go without bothering you guys and look for that interpretation?
For when I deal with interpretations, that's province-wide. It's on our website under standard interpretations.
Okay.
But you could have various interpretations by the municipality. And when we're having issues that are shown as province-wide, where it's very inconsistent all over the place. Well, I go to Edmonton, I do this, I go to Calgary, I do this. You're doing the same thing, but different. And then we will bring that through. And typically any of the municipalities, like we have the Alberta building officials on there too, and they will explain situations they're running into, and if necessary, that they recommend there's an interpretation required on the subject, that will go through the process that even though I review and sign it, we go through the sub-council that everybody's agreed on this. This is what it means. Have my technical advisors go through it as well. We put in the background information that's kept in our file. And typically, whether it's an interpretation or variance, there's a pretty standard process. What's the purpose? And if you don't have a purpose, you don't go any further.
Yeah.
The purpose of this interpretation, the purpose of this variance. So once we have that, there's discussion of the situation. Here's some things that what we think it should mean. Then we'll have code references saying this is what that code reference is. Then we'll say what's it applicable to? You know, is it part 3 buildings, part 9 buildings, or whatever? And then we'll say this is what it means, and then I'll sign it. And that interpretation applies across the province. But you can get jurisdictional interpretations and so on, but I deal with it when it's province-wide issue.
Okay. And again, those are available
That's all online.
in
And
the
all
stand data.
yeah, all stand
interpretations?
data are online. Yeah.
Great, excellent, thanks.
And as well, we have the old ones, and sometimes people say, well, my building was built in 2014 and we did this. Well, we have that archive stand data there, and we use the stand data at the time. Because the new code does only has certain application to an existing building, but you know, it's not going to old buildings. So, oh, now you got to do everything to the new code. That's not how it works. And we have reference in our own that says, how does the new code apply to existing building or not apply? So that's basically it. Any more questions? Okay. Oh.
Paul, during your presentation, you mentioned about overhang projection on limited water ingress. Is there, or somebody can help me with that, is there any projection height or trajectory there?
4 to 1. So
Yeah,
from the top of the
right.
flag to the overhang needs to be 4 times that distance.
Yeah, there's a rate.
4 above a door, you need a 4-foot overhang.
Okay.
That's in BC.
Well, I don't know the number offhand, but it's with, yeah, it provides you a ratio within the code.
Okay, thank you.
So you're currently working on the amendments and the updates to the next version.
Correct.
Will there be public comment review periods for that, or is that not happen during
No,
this process?
our code is going to be based on the National Building Code of Canada, which has
gone
gone
through
through
that.
all the public comments and reviews. It's based on the 2020 version.
Right, but if you make changes,
No, with this Alberta specific, what's already there,
right?
of what we're carrying through.
Okay,
And we're actually taking some things out that we feel isn't necessary because it's already either adjusted in another code or it doesn't belong in the code in the move towards harmonization. Probably the main one is section 3.8, being Alberta specific. We still based on the national for numbering, and some of the requirements are there, but most of it is Alberta specific that's already in the code. And there's just new language or whatever, and that basically is addressed through the technical council and so forth. There's a barrier-free sub-council and there's our building sub-council, and we work with industry. The barrier-free sub-council has representatives from the various associations that deal with that. Even one of the associations on that sub-council is a hotel association of Alberta, that they try to align their buildings to have a certain amount of accessible rooms. It's not a code requirement. It's something that is promoted, and they're doing that. And I believe it might be a code requirement or will become a code requirement sometime, but so we're trying to work with industry. There's a cost, is it onerous or not, but that's good marketing. Somebody can't stay at your hotel because you don't have that service, they're not going to stay there.
Yeah.
Okay. There's other things we're working on to harmonize as well. So.
Okay. You talked a little bit about the energy code that's going to be in Alberta, and you talked about an EnerGuide path.
Yeah.
Is that going to be like a performance path based on something like the step code in BC?
No, it's EnerGuide 2000 is an acceptable method. So whatever tier we pick and use EnerGuide 2000, that's acceptable. As opposed, the code is prescriptive, says this is how you do it. Here's how you do your performance path.
Yeah.
But if you use, a lot of them are using the modeling of EnerGuide 2000 anyway,
Yeah.
to do the performance path. So it's still, you come up to the same tier of whatever's picked using that EnerGuide modeling path. So it wasn't directly
So-
recognized, but we did recognize it in Alberta.
So in theory, because I saw 1.84 U value for
Mhm.
the lowest zone. If somebody was to go through that EnerGuide path, in theory, they could use a product that had a higher U value, but still met the overall performance of the building.
Yes,
Is that correct?
it's performance of the building.
Yeah. okay.
So if you have a house that says, okay, prescriptively, it uses 50,000 BTUs a year or whatever, just a number.
Yeah.
And you want less window or more window or whatever, and you put in more insulation, as long as you don't use that more energy. And then there's certain things you can't change because there's a minimum requirement for the heating appliance and so forth of what you can even buy, because that's regulated under NRCan. And I believe the NRCan has a higher rating, but right now it's changed from 90 to 92, I believe, for what the code requirements are. But NRCan was at 90, but the building code actually said 92% efficient. And I believe that's stepping up a little bit.
Okay.
And then with HRVs and so forth, you're getting certain benefits as well.
Some of you might have saw that the 1.80 went to 1.84. That's just simply rounding from the NFRC values. That's all it is. It's not a
Yeah.
specific performance change.
Nothing
So
drastic.
your window wouldn't be any different than it was before to hit that target. So
Yeah.
So we
it-
should see this release before March 2024
Yeah.
at some point. Okay, all right.
Yeah, the intent is to have something. It would be coming into force a year after publication. So the publication is intended to be sometime this year.
And there's no chance for a change to the language from NBC 2020 that you would be adopting. Is that correct? Like this WOCD item? window
Well,
opening
like
control.
I said, we could work within the notes, but we'd have to have. We would work with yourselves and NRC. That could be an errata if we found
Okay.
we need to adjust it.
Okay.
And we could work at that. But
So
right
it's not
now,
impossible to change.
no, it's not impossible to
Okay.
change. No,
That's all I needed to hear.
but right now, right now we're following the NBC for
Right,
that,
okay. Fair enough.
and I haven't got your documents yet, anyways.
That's right. Yeah, he's on tape. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Paul? Rick?
Just on, four-story building, smoke, how many?
No, anything in part 3. Anything in part 3. Part 3. Yeah. Yeah.
Would that make an egress window not required then?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it does say even in part 9, in your house, even in your house, says unless, except where sprinklered, you have to have the egress window, blah, 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 stuff.
It's good to know. Okay, anything else? All right, Paul, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, that's pretty much it, unless anybody wants to just talk. Anybody questions, chat? Talk about the game yesterday that I didn't see? There's beer, that's it. Thanks a bunch for coming. Spring conference, Kelowna in May. I mean, come on. For sure. Yeah, a lot of people from the West were in PEI. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Eddie. Thanks to Rick and GlassFab, the folks at Novatech,
And of course, Nicole, thank you very much. Nicole's gonna just tell us a bit about what they do here when you get a minute, but we're gonna have a beer first, I think, right? All right, let's have a beer. Thanks, guys.